Hello, thanks for joining me today. Welcome on what is a critical day for America and for democracy worldwide. It's not super cheerful, I would imagine, for a lot of people, but to those of us who have already reconciled ourselves to the frightening reality that the Republican Party is essentially overrun with criminals, accomplices to crime, obstructive criminals, and potentially election cheats. We've already made our peace with that horrifying reality. So today is more a moment of celebration that one of them, Mitt Romney, was disloyal to his party. Because the thing about fascism is it envelops people. It is potentially intoxicating. It holds out the promise of power, power without checks and balances, power without oversight, power without many of the customary limits, power without many of the inconveniences of modern democracy. Oh, I should be recording this for audio podcast as well. Please excuse me for a moment. But yes, so power often brings people into the fold, and that power corrupts people when it's being delivered as a fascistic style of government. What do I mean when I say fascist? That's a good question. I will tell you, when I say fascist and a fascist system of governance, I mean government that is ruled by lying to emotionally manipulate people, to use their worst instincts, their most hypervigilant risk calculations that can be trained to be even more racist and dismissive of the human rights of others and of the human dignity of people from other groups, whether they be cultural groups like Jewish people or ethnic, racially characterized groups such as people from Mexico or Latin American countries. Fascism capitalizes on those human tendencies to be fearful. Fascism capitalizes on people's ability to forget the horrors of war, to forget the horrors of militarization, over worship of the military at the expense of caring about people's lives. Now, I'm not a pacifist, and I believe in having a military for defense, but everything's on a continuum, and taking things to the maladaptive extreme is a feature of both fascism and of communism. I'd like to share with you a story from communist China that's relevant. In communist China, under Mao Zedong, Mao, as the leader who was worshipped by millions upon millions of Chinese people, who thought, yes, power centralized in one man will free us from the delays of consensus building, of cooperation, etc. China is more powerful having one ultimate leader. And that leader, Mao Zedong, became convinced that there was a type of evolution that could happen with plants, that you could use certain strategies to enhance plant growth, and that would be great. He then, without scientific evidence, called for this strategy to be implemented across China. And the people close to Mao, who was the ultimate leader and worshipped like a god, didn't dare tell him that his agricultural strategy was not working, was worse than useless, and that people would starve to death if they didn't change course quickly. They didn't tell him. They even staged fake photos with wooden food to show him how wildly successful his strategy was. So they did what humans do around cult leaders, around people elevated to this position of supreme importance without democratic safeguards of cooperation and consultation. And millions upon millions of people starved to death in China. It's been estimated 30 million, but the range is said by reasonable historians to be between 20 and 70 million. 70 million people in China starved to death as a consequence of this kind of glee, this delusion of empowerment that the people of China would be stronger and more powerful because they accepted this key figure to be the supreme leader. And people who support Trump are also the kind of people for whom evidence no longer matters. Instead, they are overwhelmed with that sense of potency, of power, that they are investing all of their energies and their belief in this one man. And I would argue, too, that some of Bernie Sanders supporters also overlook the requirements of democracy for building friendships and relationships and consensus and finding compromises through consultation to make progress and to advance a nation. People who put all their emotional and intellectual eggs in the Bernie Sanders basket are leaning a little bit towards that communist side. I understandably, in reaction to America's political lurch to the right over the past few decades since Reagan, because of the abandonment of the, what's it called, fairness in truth? The fairness doctrine, which compelled news organizations to be truthful or to face legal consequence. Reagan's abandonment of the fairness doctrine led to corrupt organizations such as Fox News purposefully tricking the public, purposely misrepresenting facts in order to gradually inoculate more and more American citizens to evidence, reason, and logic, so that they instead would become cult followers of the Republican Party, have all their emotions suborned into a narrative of Democrats, enemies, migrants, Black people, gay people, enemies, Republicans, defenders of the social fabric and of the strength of the nation. Oh, I have not been noticing comments. I will bring back comments. Mr. Ed says hi. Brian says sad day. Harvested Beats says hi. Small says like a pendulum. Doc says hello. Zinte says hello. Pol Pot did the same in Cambodia. That sounds likely. Soot says Romney did the right thing, country first. And why have you guys kicked Enlighten Up off the platform? Please fix that. Can you unblock her? Please don't say things like the US will destroy itself. This is not a channel for promoting nihilism or despairing cynicism. We don't do that. We fight until our last breath, and we take heart from people over the course of history who have had difficult causes to fight for. We take heart from the people who fought for civil rights, even when they were being having water cannons used against them, having bones broken in their skull, etc. They fought on for causes that were right and just. Democracy has already suffered a tragic blow, and we are dealing with the fallout. But today, more Americans will become aware that Trump is guilty, and we need to help them work out that the Republican Party, with the exception of Mitt Romney and Justin Amash, who had to leave the Republican Party, are guilty of being accomplices to Trump's crimes. Now, I saw Susan Collins on Fox News, and Susan Collins was saying, oh, yes, the phone call was wrong. Parts of it were good. So we can see their strategy is to now, in part, admit to what is undeniable. Trump, in his phone call to President Zelensky, inappropriately requested foreign aid. But she's trying to limit the discussion or trying to focus people's energies on purely that call, which conceals from the public the fact that it's not the phone call. The phone call was Trump lending his own voice to part of his broader scheme, which was to steal $341 million from Congress. It wasn't his. He stole that money to use in his extortion attempt. If you borrow money secretly without acknowledging it publicly, without following the procedures and protocols for messing with congressional appointments of money, it's stealing. It's violating the Impoundment Control Act. And even if you later on give the money back, and he later on undid the block on the aid once his scheme was uncovered by the whistleblower, even if you give the money back, the stealing still exists. So I think that's an important metaphor and analogy that we could use, and we should have used earlier, to explain to people what it is that Trump did wrong. He stole the money, and when people said, we'd like to report that Trump has stolen some money in order to extort people, extort American allies at war to help him commit an additional crime, then he went, no, money's back now, no harm, no foul, no crime. That's the argument of Republicans. Mike Bloomberg has said he's going to donate thousands of dollars to maintain the staff that he currently has to who is eventually the nominee. So Mike Bloomberg doesn't necessarily have much of a chance at all, even though he has appeal to Republican-leaning independents who want to preserve capitalism from the likes of Sanders. So Elizabeth Warren admits to being a pro-capitalism. She just wants more appropriate guardrails, but she doesn't have a great deal of support amongst the Black community, and I'm going to trust them on that because Black votes count, and they are the reliable Dem voting base. Under fascism, under Trump's intoxicating promise to preserve, and it's an implicit promise. I don't mean Trump goes out there and explicitly says, I will preserve a white majority in America, but his actions implicitly promise that to Americans. So there's always going to be more white people than there should be voting for Trump because there is a receptive audience for that message amongst white Christian dominionists who want America to be Christian and who also seem to think Christian means white. Paula White, Trump's spiritual advisor, was ranting about the superior blood of Jesus. And I realized those are the same people that can't cope with depictions of Jesus as a swarthy Semitic man. To them, Jesus is white, and Christianity is a white lifestyle owned by white people. Maybe you allow some people of color to be Christians as well, but their brand of Christianity and their brand of aspirational Christian dominance is essentially about whiteness, as well as oppressing women and upholding the patriarchy so that women don't have bodily autonomy, can't decide whether or not they want to be the vessel for a man's sperm and continue with an unintended pregnancy or not. I'm getting a question from an account with the name Try Drugs. Don't try drugs, man. Drugs increase the incidence of schizophrenia, and schizophrenia is associated with psychosis, and psychosis is strongly associated with violence. So I actually recommend not trying drugs if you can possibly avoid it. Pharmaceutical drugs, sure. Minimize alcohol consumption if you can because it's associated with increased cancer risk, etc. WebJ0219 points out that Christianity came to the US via a European lens. Oh yes, minimize pharmaceutical drugs as well, sure, but I mean, pharmaceuticals are still at least designed to improve health. So you don't want to use opioids if you can help it, unless you're in extreme pain, and you should. It's interesting because Black patients are typically tested for drugs prior to being given prescriptions for opioids, even though opioid death rates are percentage-wise higher amongst white populations. Champagne's still arguing in favor of Bernie even though it should be such a wake-up call to you, Champagne, that Republicans and conservative columnists are urging Republicans all over the US in states where there are open primaries to join those open primaries and vote for Bernie Sanders, because they believe very strongly that Bernie Sanders is a candidate that would be defeated by Trump. So you don't have to believe that their strategy has any merit to it. But I'm telling you, the Republicans have better strategy than they have morals. Democrats have better morals at this point in history. Not always. Democrats across history have not always been the people with the high moral ground. Yes, let's get back to politics. I will say I wish drugs had been a little bit more legal for treating my mother, who had metastasized breast cancer and, as a consequence, high levels of anxiety, understandably so, and that possibly some legal STD or legal medical marijuana could have helped her spend the last few weeks of her life in a little more emotional comfort and physical comfort. But that's still also part of politics, because the Democrats are more likely to be the party of drug legalization, except Biden's a bit more cautious about that. And young people need to do more to get on board with Biden. But at the same time, young people aren't as reliable voters as others. Like, we talk about getting young people out to vote, but it's quite difficult to reverse certain trends, such as young people feeling alienated from politics and feeling alienated from the political system and not having the same years of emotional investment in politics and years of rehearsed behavior, like getting out and voting. So I think that young people will vote for Bernie Sanders where they can, but that level of enthusiasm is still not as broadly spread amongst the population of young people as, say, the enthusiasm for voting is amongst older people who are inherently more conservative. So yeah, Sanders is not really a contender. Sanders is also complicit in helping to promote votes for Trump just prior to the 2016 election. If you've read parts of the Mueller report, at least, you should know that the Kremlin promoted Bernie Sanders' campaign in order to better suppress the vote. They knew that aggrieved Bernie Sanders voters were sunk into the cult of personality and would behave in a ride or die manner about Bernie Sanders. So yesterday or the day before, we listened to some audio footage of Bernie Sanders sounding very dodgy about what his team knew and when, and why they didn't come forward to support Hillary Clinton's stated narrative prior to the 2016 election, that her campaign was being attacked by Russian accounts, Russian social media accounts. And the Sanders campaign had information that would have confirmed that. But they left Hillary Clinton out in the cold, claiming that for herself. Bernie Sanders allowed his supporters to continue to argue that the Russian data points were a hoax perpetrated by Hillary Clinton, knowing that one word from him, he himself, the great leader, would have stopped his supporters from saying that it was a hoax. Champagne, I love that you've been here for so long, but take those Kremlin talking points off my channel. The reason why other Dems don't want Bernie winning is because Bernie's not a Democrat. He attacks the Democratic Party. They are the opposition that he's, in fact, most enthusiastic about attacking. And you can hear that when you hear the different crescendos of boos amongst his audience. His audience is primed to boo the idea of other Democrats. So Bernie doesn't work with other people. He doesn't work with his colleagues. He's only supported by one senator. Oh my gosh, I'll have to stop talking about this because there's so much more important stuff to talk about at the moment. Get over yourselves, idiot Bernie Sanders supporters, or get off my channel. I've devoted enough time to trying to help you see reason about this. Go away for today. Okay, I've just had enough of you today. I'm sounding like an exasperated parent parent. But really, white people, get over yourselves. If you're a black Bernie Sanders supporter, you too should know better. And the majority of black voters do know better. They don't support Sanders. They support Biden because he's more of a tried and tested candidate, I guess. And he has a history of achievements in a foreign policy arena. And that's one area where Trump has done substantial damage to American security and American interests by sabotaging relationships with allies. So Joe Biden is well poised to restore some of those relationships. And if he has a black female vice presidential candidate, say Kamala Harris, he is well positioned to win not only the Democratic primary, but the election. So Warren supporters, thanks also for your good nature and your interest in plans to remove some of the corrupt corporatist interests from American politics. That is really key to improving the lives of American citizens. She nevertheless is not the candidate to win the primary. This election needs to be a victory for Democrats. It needs to be a victory in electoral college states. It needs to be a sizable victory. And she does not have adequate support from African American communities. That should tell you something. They know America best. I'm Australian. I don't know America the best, but I know enough to look to the people who are pragmatic rather than hell-bent on their own ideological leanings and promoting their own ideas about how to save America or promote an American utopia. Yes, Biden, Kamala would be a powerful combination that would ensure a Democratic victory in a free and fair election, for sure, knowing that we do need to do more to promote a free and fair election. We need to do more at state levels to oppose Republican legislation organized to disenfranchise black voters. And we need to do more to safeguard electoral systems and prevent them from being hackable electronic, internet-connected, modem-connected voting machines that are also highly deleterious to the chances of democratic survival. Yes, an enthusiastic base would be helpful for the Dems, but not an enthusiastic cult base that have 50% of them not agreeing that they will vote for a candidate if not their preferred Dem candidate. So that's what 50% of Bernie voters are. Oh, champagne. Yep, that's a great defense. Don't criticize Bernie supporters because our feelings will get hurt and we won't come on board. We would not patronize or ostracize you, but you're so difficult to live with because cult thinking has corrupted your ability to think logically. So it's exhausting trying to share logic and share evidence with people who have psychologically immunized themselves to it. So no, we have to conserve energy. If Sanders supporters can't be convinced from looking at the evidence that Sanders is not a team player, does not have a history of legislative success, does not have a history of getting anything done in America, and in fact has a big history of endorsing communism, holidaying in communist Russia for his honeymoon, promoting Donald Trump votes 2 or 3 days before the election through his tweets, etc., then just stop talking to me until you've learned some sense. Stop talking to me. That's okay. And if you can't stop and you won't stop, then I will block. You. Just keep quiet until you've stopped supporting Bernie Sanders because it's a dead horse to keep whipping. And I don't have it in me to be pleasant about it when I've already spent probably 20 minutes trying to explain to you some of the evidence against Bernie Sanders. Norma Jean says, after Trump, it's hard to trust rational thinking and deductive reasoning. Yes, the theft of the 2016 election threw everybody's emotions into disarray and is a powerful tool for fascists to feel like they are a disruptive, powerful force overturning expectations, etc. People didn't expect the degree of cheating, and people would have been better prepared for Russian attacks on the election if Bernie Sanders and his surrogates had come forward about the evidence in their possession of Russian interference. Yes, it would overturn historical precedent for a first-term president not to get 2 terms, but Trump is historically terrible, and no president has ever been impeached before in their first term. Some other presidents have been impeached, but not in their first term. So don't just stick to what you've been exposed to. Also be open to novel data points that should inform your understanding of what's happening. Oh, I know what I can do to cheer myself up. I can stop talking to Bernie supporters because they're exhausting and delusional, and I will put up this instead. Nancy Pelosi is a brilliant strategist. Yes, and she's pragmatic, and I was angry with her maybe a year ago, very angry. So I should respect other people's journey towards wisdom, because I thought she was never going to impeach Trump. And I didn't acknowledge the genius in waiting for momentum to build up in the public, for public awareness of Trump's crimes to grow, to then build on that momentum to have this very important moment in the public where, yes, Trump got acquitted, but there was pressure for witnesses and documents, pressure that people paid attention to. This is all an optical program to fight against fascism, which runs on optics. Fascism can make everything inefficient in your country. Fascism can take you to war and expose you to danger, but fascism will always tell you that everything is wonderful and that you're winning harder than you've ever won before in your life. David, that comment you made is quite bizarre and sounds on the verge of pornographic. I don't know if that's intentional or not. Yes, Nancy has a great deal of political experience. Let's see if we have any other banners. Let's not forget that people who are surrounded by death are more likely to vote for Donald Trump. And let's not forget that people who are racist are more likely to have heart health problems because lack of trusting relationships with people of different races actually leads to a general inability to form trusting relationships with others. Being in a religion, though, is associated with longevity, presumably because of the benefits of communities and looking out for each other and feeling positive and involved and getting out there and fighting against entropy, the entropy of human existence. Okay. So, David, your comment, I'm from the land of feeling down under, was not inappropriately sexual. You were just feeling down. I'm sorry to be. I hope it's cheered you up, my misinterpretation of your comment. But I can understand that you would be feeling sad. I'm sorry, everybody, that I have been arguing with Bernie supporters. It's beneath me, and I need to take a leaf out of Nancy Pelosi's masterful strategy book and not do it. It's a rough night. It's a rough night for Americans. Look at the people around you protesting. If you're on Twitter, look at footage of all of the people standing outside the White House chanting, "We will not give up." What are they chanting? Let's have a look. I don't. Okay. We won't back down. Okay, I'm going to bring that up on screen so we can all hear the audio and it can revitalize us. All right, guys? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to scroll to a little bit of footage of Americans out there protesting. All right. Let's see. I can hear it as well. Fascism is hard. Fascism is hard to live under. Okay. Share. Can we hear it? No, I'm not hearing it. I will try again. Okay, how's the volume of that? Can you hear that? Great sound, that's good. All right, I'll mute it because we don't need to subject ourselves to it on a continuing basis, but it's great. And people standing up like that is a key to overturning fascism, because fascism is contagious to the weak-minded. But weak-minded people will often just gravitate towards what seems strong. So we need to be, rather than relaxing in our despondency, that's a luxury. I've done it too, so I'm not judging you, but I'm trying to inspire you to snap out of it. Be despondent for a bit, eat ice cream, do what you need to do, but still try to aim for it to be brief, because these are the moments that try men's souls. And so watch Adam Schiff. That might just make you despondent, but at the same time it says, yes, take this moment seriously. This is a president without conscience, without morals. He will not be constrained. He will not be deterred from committing whatever crimes he wants to advance his own interests. And he may or may not believe that his interests are aligned with America. As Alan Dershowitz argued, presidents believe that their own re-election is in the public interest. Trump, I'm sure, tells himself that only he will do what's right for America. And he probably sees his crimes and his graft as just being the little criminal bonus he awards to himself for being America's savior. That's probably how he thinks. But it's not true. His ability to be manipulated by corrupt foreign leaders works to the severe detriment of American interests. Okay, we might need to try drugs. Try drugs, you're a distraction. And what we need to do here is, this is a channel for, it's a pep talk channel for taking on fascism, for fighting against fascism. So I do say that Bernie Sanders is a spoiler candidate for challenging fascism, and that's really key. And we have a limited time window to convince people of that so that they don't sabotage the 2020 election in the same way that many of them successfully sabotaged the 2016 election. So we need those people to stop being terrible. But yes, we don't tolerate cynicism, and we don't tolerate both sidesism, because when one of those sides is fascism all of the people that say, oh, well, Hillary Clinton's just as bad as Donald Trump, both sides, neo-Nazis and the people protesting against neo-Nazis, both sides. That is a mental reflex that should be consigned to the dustbin, especially in the context of climate change, significant existential threats to the human race, significant problems that we have to commit to dealing with if we want to be responsible adults who look after our children, our communities, and our nations and our world. Thank you, Julia. I'm just glad to hear somebody who is sensible about Bernie Sanders and his documented decades-long tradition of not working well with others. So yes, we don't like both sidesism. We have to also resist whataboutism. Whenever we're tempted to say whataboutism, when Donald Trump does something or criticize someone and we say, well, what about you, Donald Trump? Let's try not to do that. What we should be doing is saying, morals say this. So yes, your crimes expose your hypocrisy, but foregrounded should be our assertion of what is moral, not just a constant childish, but you did this, but you did that, because that just leads to an endless cycling of mutual recrimination and accusations. It's not our most helpful strategy. I'm going to pop up your comment for a second, Julia, but if you want me to take it down, I will also, because Bernie supporters can be vindictive. Well, harvested beets, we have to mute distractions, otherwise we get distracted. And some people you can't bring on board, and some people will deplete your energy. And our energy is to cheer ourselves up and motivate ourselves, not just to be in a circle jerk of self-affirmation and self-validation, but to be brainstorming in a helpful circle of what we can do going forwards. So your brainstorming suggestion, I thank you for at least making it, is let's consider not muting people that we disagree with. And I will tell you, I've been broadcasting now for two years, and people who are a distraction and people who are unhelpful, even Bernie supporters who are very, very persistent in pushing their points of view, their provably wrong points of view, their empirically provable wrong points of view, and they're actively unhelpful, and their 2016 election sabotaging points of view, if they're allowed to derail a conversation, they will. And I'm not saying there's necessarily malicious intent behind it either. You can use do-goodedness and an intent to do good for harm. And that's one of the more difficult lessons for people to learn. But we've had a few years now. We've had nearly 4 years to process what some of the Bernie Sanders supporters did and what some of the fake Kremlin accounts who were pretending to be Bernie Sanders supporters did when they encouraged Bernie Sanders supporters to believe that they had been grievously mistreated by the DNC and that Bernie was the legitimate winner, even though he lost by 4 million votes. He lost by 4 million votes. Hillary won the general election by close to 3 million votes. And when we complain about the cheating, it's not a fake Kremlin-backed conspiracy theory. It's a well-documented, massive effort. There's multiple criminal charges associated with it. The Mueller report exposed a significant amount of purposeful international effort to steal the election results from one candidate. Thanks, Julie. So, harvested beets, thank you for your input. I do welcome people's suggestions, and you're not a Bernie supporter, so your suggestion hasn't tired me out or exhausted me. I'm fine with it. How am I going for time? All right. So where do I think we go from here? Let me put it up in a banner. We amplify anti-stereotypes, such as Romney. Romney's vote. Okay. And I'll put it in a number. 1. So we build independence by continuing to share this narrative, not just by insisting that we are right, but by saying the evidence is inescapable, and even people such as Romney can admit it. Trump is guilty of multiple crimes. We make ourselves familiar with the shorthand versions of what he did. So Stephen Colbert did a catchy jingle. There's just one thing that you need to know. Trump said, do us a favor, though. I feel so much better already using humor. I hope you're feeling better, David Rush, and I hope to tap more into my humorous spirit than my antagonistic towards Cult Bernie, because that's not very funny and it's not very inviting. It is better to focus our energies on things that are inviting. And getting caught into cycles of mutual recrimination with Bernie supporters or Trump supporters isn't the best investment of our time. So, 2. So 1, amplify anti-stereotypes such as Romney's speech to show bipartisan support for truth. And that it's not just Democrats trying to grab power, it's people without any motivation. Romney is what you would call a disinterested witness to the truth. Disinterested witnesses. The truth. Now that's a very common troll comment. The intolerant left. Yes, it's true. Fascism does test the limits of tolerance, and it shows that there are certain things you can't and you shouldn't tolerate, that it does lead to weakness and dysfunction. Can we block the reappearance of the bad troll? Or should we let him say one more comment? Amplify disinterested witnesses to the truth. 3. Join Fair Fight Action, which is an advocacy group fighting voter disenfranchisement. Join Fair Fight Action. And there you go. Oh, I'm writing this in the wrong section. Okay. That join Fair Fight Action. And 3, keep paying attention to the depredations on democracy and democratic standards. So Trump has just given the Border Patrol people additional powers to be secretive, to conceal their actions and to destroy documents. I can show you that actually on my Twitter profile page. Let's check it out. All right. A U.S. citizen arrested by Border Patrol died in custody within 6 hours of being detained, so presumably being beaten up. Here we go. Exclusive. Customs and Border Patrol gain an extra layer of secrecy. Let's check this out. So we'll take off Twitter and I will add a new thing. I will add this article, Customs and Border Protection. By gaining a security agency designation, the Border Police can further shield themselves from public view. So CBP stands for Customs and Border Protection. They've gained a designation as a security agency. All right. So the risks from fascism are very large. and people who fancy themselves as being the only people with the answer to what appeals to Americans. They're being a little bit selfish, and quite significantly selfish, probably because they're out of the blast radius of fascism, because it definitely heightens your thinking when you are more exposed to danger from a fascist government. So yes, that's a good comment. Best part about Romney's comments is he's calling out his fellow Republicans who are liars. Yes. I'm going to highlight this man's comment just to practice equanimity. He possibly is that person, but he's quite possibly also a Russian troll. But yes, he's also a disinterested witness to the truth. It's against Romney's self-interest to attract all of the death threats and potential literal violence to himself and his family that he's going to incur as someone who stood up to Trumpism, to Trump brand fascism. All right, chaps. Well, I think that's it from me for the day. I'll go. Take care, everybody, and wishing you all the best. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody. Yes, Mormons have a prophecy of the white horse. A Mormon saves the day in a presidential election. That reminds me of somebody I'd love to interview. Who's familiar with Muller, She Wrote? That's a podcast. The main host is called AG. She's spoken a lot about that prophecy of the Mormons. I think it's nice. All of those cynical comments of, you can never trust any Republican. Republicans are always undilutedly evil. It's not true. People aren't our enemies. Bad ideas are our enemies. And yes, people can get taken over by bad ideas and do terrible, awful things in pursuit of their bad goals and their bad ideas. And under the influence of selfish motivations and criminal motivations and wicked, greedy aspirations. But at the same time, even people who've done terrible things can be rehabilitated. And one of the strongest tools against fascism is the flourishing of empathy. So I don't want to flourish empathy in an indulgent way. I don't want to put on rose-colored glasses that overlook the harm that Republicans have done, that overlook the harm Republican policies have done. But I do want to say, don't exclude the possibility of people still doing good things. And Romney has done a good thing and a brave thing and a commendable thing and a thing that will have far-reaching impact. So we're seeing polls already today saying a lot of independents think that Trump should be removed. After Romney's actions, there will be even more, because he's made it untenable for people of conscience to ignore democratic arguments. They're no longer just democratic arguments. Mitt Romney has made it also a Republican argument that Trump is a criminal who can't be kept in office in good conscience. So the people keeping him in office are doing so with a bad, guilty conscience. And Mitt Romney called that out, for which I am incredibly grateful and appreciative. So that's exactly Brian saying it only takes one to finally stand up. So that's the beauty of today for me. Thank you all, guys. And I'll foreground Brian's comment for a second. It only takes one. Every one person that stands up is a butterfly flapping its wings, potentially changing the course of human history. That's my positive note to end on for the day. Thank you. Thank you, Norma Jean. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody else who's still on here who I can't see. I'm so grateful for your continuing presence. And as yesterday, I asked that if anyone can think of people they know from Twitter who might want to be interviewed by me or participate in a conversation with me live, to please ask them and tag me in your request so that I can also say, yes, please, I'd love to do that. Some celebrities won't have time, but at the same time, you can cast a broad net and catch one or two interesting conversationalist fish. All the best. All the best. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you again. Thanks, Brian. End broadcast.